Hi, I'm Macy.
And I'm Missy.
We're best friends
and business partners. And each week, we're going to bring you a quote that inspires us, and we're going to talk about it.
Join us as we break down our favorite impactful messages for leadership and share how you can apply them to lead with confidence and purpose.
Get ready for a fun and authentic journey into leadership, life, and everything in between. Well, hey, bestie.
Well, bestie, I am so excited. Today is going to be like such a fabulous episode.
It is.
I know it's going to be one that like really explores what happens when calling meets responsibility. And our guest today is going to talk about inheriting a company that allowed her to step into her calling.
That's right. And I'm excited because it's going to be a conversation about honoring what's been built, casting a bigger vision, and believing in the potential placed within people, both by design and by faith.
Yes. Okay. So I am going to introduce our next guest. She's going to share a little bit about herself, and then we're going to mention the quote, and then we're going to talk about it, right? Okay. So welcome, Megan Tarrant.
Yay,
we are so excited that you're here. Will you share with our guests, tell our guests who Megan is?
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. So
You're
good
welcome.
to see you guys again.
We're thrilled you're here.
Megan, let's see. So Megan, I am a mom. I have two kids, 13-year-old going into high school next year, which is just crazy, which is a little mini me. She's so much like me. And then I have a son who is 8, and he is all things sports. And my husband is a coach and also works in the business with us. So what do? So we have a family business. It is called Clements Fluids, and it's a second generation family owned and led business. We primarily serve oil and gas operators, and we manufacture fluids that are used for their entire life cycle of their wells. So that's what we do, but why we do it is even more important to me. We exist to unearth the potential of every person and every well we encounter.
Oh, that's good.
I just have a quick side note about Megan. When I first met Megan, it was at a conference, right? And it was the first time she was away from her kid. I'll never forget this. And this was like years ago, but it's one of those images and conversations that I actually share with several people that are going through the same thing. So she was really nervous because she had never left her kids overnight to travel anywhere, right? Like it was, if they went anywhere, they went as a family. Like it was never an overnighter without her kids. I go, Megan, the first night, it may be a little bit rough. I'm going to be honest. But by night 3, you are going to be sprawled out like a starfish.
Yes.
No husband, no kids. It's going to be amazing. And then what happened? By night 3, you were like, so right.
Yes.
You were so right.
Funny. I mean, even now, I'm like, I feel like I'm a pro at this. Like, okay, where am I going now? I travel a lot more these days.
Oh, that
was the first time.
I know it.
Crazy that I've traveled a lot.
That first time is tough. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess we're used to it, Miss. I actually
definitely
love
used to it now.
The starfish lips. One of the things that Megan didn't share, because she is one of those humble leaders, is that her alma mater recognized her as a 40 under 40 accomplished leader. And I just say kudos to you because that's a big deal.
Thank you.
Wow, it really is. So congratulations. And girls, this is going to be an incredible episode. I say we get right into it. Today's quote is one of my favorites. It's coined by one of my favorite authors, and it is this: God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And that is Mark Batterson.
Gosh, it is so good. All right, Megan, we're going to ask you to get us started. What comes to mind when you think of this quote?
Well, first, I think of Moses. I think about Moses telling God all the reasons as to why he was not capable. I think about him saying his speech, he was slow to speak, and God beautifully reminding him that I made your mouth, right? I made your mouth. It's not about what you can do. It's what I can do.
Yeah.
And I think so many times we have a false sense of humility. There's like, no, I can't do this. But it's like, you're limiting me. Like God is saying, you're limiting me and you're limiting my ability to work in you. I created
Yes.
you, I created you on purpose. And if I want to use you, I'm going to use you and I can do anything. So for me, that's what I think about. And thank goodness that I believe that, because that's the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing now. Not
So
because of my
good.
capabilities or my
Yeah.
experience, but
Yeah.
because he's chosen me
Yeah.
for this role.
Yeah.
So
Missy,
good.
what about you?
I was going to say, what about you? You go first.
Okay. So what I think about really, it kind of goes back to what we were joking about before, about really about motherhood, right? Like as mothers, even as fathers, but we're three women. So we'll talk about us because we know, like we are not qualified to be mothers. Like there's no handbook, right? Like
Right.
there's no qualification that says you're going to be a great mom, except for what Megan just said, because God believes that we could be a great mom. And we are learning as we are going. And all three of us were in very different stages of motherhood. Missy, Megan, just so you know, she's an empty nester.
Yeah, don't blink.
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't blink.
I have teenagers. I have boys that I want to cry when I think about, like they don't need me as much. Of course they're always going to need their mama, but they don't need me as much. And then you're raising kids, like you're literally still raising them to be the people that you know that they could be. And I think motherhood is just one of those things that I don't know a single person that feels qualified to do the job, but God knows better. God knows better.
That's so good. That's so good.
Miss, what about you?
So for me, ever since I was a little girl, I mean, from the time 3 years old, people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? And I would say a teacher. And I was very confident in that. I knew that is a gifting God has given me and that's what I was going to be. But as I grew as a person, as I had new opportunities, in my career, I started feeling that purpose feeling, right? That feeling, that calling in your gut that God's calling you for more. And growing up, I would have never been audacious enough to think that I could have owned a franchise for children or been an entrepreneur, or the stages we've stood on, Macy, the people that we've taught, the opportunities that we have. And it is not by my doing, because
Right.
I'm educated to teach second grade, right? But when God calls you with purpose into something, if he calls you to it, he's going to get you through it. And he's going to give you everything you need to get through it. And so that's where my mind goes when I heard that. So it's one of my favorite quotes. And I think we all have ways we've lived it out. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love what you just said. And if you're taking notes, which we know many of our listeners do, like if God calls you to it, he's going to work you through it. I think that's a tweetable if we tweeted, which we don't. But
if only we tweeted.
I mean, we could probably be millionaires if we tweeted. I don't know if you get paid for tweets, but I think that is a great one to write down.
It is.
So.
Okay. So Megan, take us back a bit. What was it like growing up around the business that your dad built?
Well, so our business is 24 hours. And for a long time, it was really my dad and my mom. I say my dad, but my mom was such a huge part of the business too. My dad was more, in the front, right? He was in front of the customers, but my mom was the one behind the scenes. I mean, she literally did all the books for years out of her house with me in her lap. So the company is actually as old as me, which will be 40 this year. But
Wow.
so, growing up around the business, there was really no separation of work and family.
Yeah.
There was a lot of vacations that my dad didn't get to go on. We could never go on cruises because there was no technology to have the phone. I mean,
right.
even like my dad had one of the first cell phones. and it was the bag phone.
Right, in the car.
In his car. And we had a lake lot at the time, and we would be out on the boat, but he would have it honk through his horn to when it rang. So like he would be close enough to the shore to be able to come back on the boat to be able to answer the customer's call or go. I mean, that we were just always, tied to that.
Right.
And even just right outside my bedroom growing up was the kitchen. And I could hear him kind of all throughout the night. He'd be on the phone all night, working on stuff, calling trucks. And so, I mean, being around the business, I saw how hard my parents worked.
Yeah.
And I saw how hard it was on their marriage. I saw how hard it was on our family. But I knew that it was because of the sacrifice that they were making for our family. Like I didn't see it as a negative. I saw it as, wow, like they're doing so much for our family. And they set just great examples of, my dad made it to all of my basketball games and volleyball games and he worked a lot. So, I mean, I don't know how he did it all, but he did it.
And I think owning a business and entrepreneurship, it's not glamorous, right? I mean, a lot of people think that it's going to be like rainbows and unicorns, and that's not how it is. So was there a time with that in mind, Megan, like it's not this glamorous thing? Your dad had to give up a lot. Your mom had to give a lot. But like, was there a moment that you're like, I'm made to do this. I can't wait to take over the business. Or was it right? Or was it a matter of like your dad was getting to the age to be retired, so it made perfect sense for you to take over? What did that look like?
Well, so I was actually positioning my husband, Chase, to take over the business from my dad. So Chase and I both started working in the business right out of college. We didn't have intention to, but because we met and wanted to get married and we're just trying to have a house and a family and all the things, Chase wanted to be a coach and a teacher, and I wanted to be an attorney. And so we ended up both kind of sacrificing a little bit to just have stability so we could get married and start a life together. And, Chase started in the field and I started in the office. And when I was young, my dad used to say the oil field was not a place for a lady. And so I didn't have the opportunity that Chase did to work in the field, to be in sales, to work in operations, because it just wasn't. I mean, it's gotten a lot better over the years, but at the time I can understand why my dad and Chase both would agree on that. But all that to say, we both grew up in the business with different paths. His was in the field, mine was in the office, and was really trying to position him to take over the business. And I was trying to stay home with our kids, because not necessarily because I wanted to, but more because I felt like that's what I needed to. You say all the time, well, babies don't keep. And next thing you know, they're out of the house, so I'm like, okay, I have the ability to stay home. Like I need to cherish this time. Well, I'll just say this. I'm not cut out to stay home.
I was not either. So I hear you. I hear you.
I mean, I remember just like, even with Charlie, he's my youngest, I had like a 2-week maternity leave and then I was like back at the office because I love to solve problems. And I know that if I don't have any problems to solve, I'll probably make some just in order to have them to solve. But so as I was positioning Chase to take over the business, our family really went through some hard times within the business and within our personal relationships. I mean, what we were doing was just not working. It was so stressful that it was hurting our marriage. It was hurting the dynamics with my parents. I mean, I knew that they loved me and that they were proud of us and they wanted us to do this, but it was just really, really hard. And so all that really put us at a place where we broke. I mean, we broke as a family and we had to put all the pieces back together. And as part of that, I ended up kind of saying, this isn't worth it. Like, I want to be home with my family at night and be present and not just be so stressed that I can't even, pay attention to my kids. And so I ended up kind of just saying, like, we got to do something different. And my parents agreed, and which was so wonderful. So we met this sweet family counselor named Kristen Parker, and she worked with our family and helped us put it all back together. And part of that process was she worked with Chase and I on executive coaching. She did the strength finders with us. She did Enneagram with us individually. And there was a moment I'll never forget. She said, Megan, do you think that God would have given you these gifts and expected you to not use them?
That is
I was
powerful.
like, but Chase has all this, he was the one that has the field experience with the customers. And she's like, yeah, but you have a vision. Like what you see and what comes so naturally to you is what is really needed to run a business. Like, know all the things, Megan. And so part of that process was just coming to terms with it myself, and I remember I sat down with Chase and was like, I think I want to step into the CEO role. And he's like, and I was so worried about it. I built this up, because I didn't want to feel like I didn't want him to feel like I was stepping on his toes, and he was like, oh, thank God. I mean, it's obvious that, you to be in that role. And, my parents said the same thing.
Wow.
It's like
Everybody knew. Everybody saw it.
Yeah.
There's no denying, right?
Like me realizing it,
Love it. So you kind of a piggyback off of what you just said, because you were talking about your giftedness, right? That God's called you. Our quote this week, it shows up with the people that you lead, meaning we know how important it is to give people permission to be that person that God's called them to be. So what does that look like at Clements and under your leadership?
Hey, bestie. We just got some amazing feedback from a client we recently worked with. Their team's morale and engagement skyrocketed after our training.
I love hearing that. Companies are seeing higher retention, lower turnover, and even increased revenue and productivity because leaders are investing in their teams.
And communication and team efficiency are improving, which we know leads to better customer service and huge cost savings. If you want these results, check out our website, Mpactful Messages, to learn how we can help you.
And for more leadership tips and strategies, sign up for our newsletter, mmleadershipnews.com.
Okay. Well, before I answer that question, I want to say one more thing.
Okay.
About how God has used, it was like, you have to learn this lesson, Megan, before you can actually teach this to your company. But
okay.
So I said my daughter, Michael Ann, is a lot like me. All throughout elementary, she would get the character award for leadership. And during this season, I remember I'd get the email, your daughter's, going to be recognized in chapel if you want to attend. And when they would give her the leadership award, I would just kind of roll my eyes. Oh, that girl is just bossy. And I just remember the Lord speaking to me in that moment, being like, Megan, if you don't actually acknowledge that as a gift in yourself, you're never going to be able to acknowledge that gift in your daughter. And that's your job as her mom. Why is she like you? Because you can help her turn that into something great,
Yeah.
That's good.
And so anyways, that was kind of the learning lesson. Okay, Megan, you're forcing yourself to recognize this in yourself so that you can help your daughter, right? And not just call her bossy, because, there's so much more to it than that. Yes, can we be bossy? Absolutely. But, at Clements, we use a lot of tools to help people discover how God has created them to be, I think, there's ways in which each of us are naturally gifted. And, every tool is different. We use Culture Index. That was really eye-opening to me. When I say Chase and I are opposites, when I first discovered Culture Index, the paper literally showed how opposite we were. And it was like, wow, okay. Once you kind of understand how you're naturally wired and you start leaning into that and you start understanding that, you don't have to focus on your weaknesses. Like a lot of times your weaknesses are really just your strengths overdone. And if you lean into your strengths and see, oh gosh, I can totally see how, that's a blind spot, but I think here at Clements, we do a lot of discovery work. We actually do recruiting through these tools too, because it doesn't mean that you can't do anything. Anybody can do anything for a short period of time, but is it fulfilling? And how taxing is it on you? And that bleeds over into their family, right? Like
absolutely.
If they come home and they're empty and like what they did at work was so just painful and, just hard, like they don't have anything left,
Yeah.
So we've really tried to use that in our hiring and in our coaching and really getting people in the right seats.
Yeah. You had mentioned the tool, you use Culture Index. We use DISC in a similar fashion.
Yes.
Right. We love DISC for that reason, to help people see exactly, really what they're called to do or qualified to do, because they're gifts. So let's just say, Megan, we have someone listening right now and they don't feel qualified for what they're called to do. Do you have an insight or an action step that maybe they could take on right now to help them discover, you're right, you're not qualified, or no, you're wrong, God is telling, right, try something different. Or no, you're wrong, like God is really calling on you because you are qualified. So what would be an insight or an action step that someone might be, if they're listening and they're like, I don't feel qualified to do what I'm doing?
Oh, everything in me wants to have like a magic step that you take this quiz and you do this.
Right.
And, I wish it were that easy. I think that what I've been told over and over and over is the word abide. Abiding in him is how, like, the more you know the Father, the more you know his nature, the more you know his will, the more you're going to know what his will for your life is. And that's really where God starts revealing to you that path. And, I don't think it's as simple as, one day that, God says, hey, Megan, you're supposed to be CEO of this company. I mean, it was little glimpses that I feel like I started looking for God in my current situation and reflecting on where God had been at work in my life. And that, where I had seen him move within our business, is what gave me the heart for our business, right? So then having a heart for our business in a different way, and then having the ability to kind of understand how he had created me to be, that I wasn't this broken, bossy, I want to say something that you needed to turn down, if you will, too much.
Sure. Yeah. Too much.
You think through those things. Like, I would go into meetings and I'd be like, Megan, just stop talking. Like, Megan, just turn yourself down. You don't know the answer, just those things that go through your head. But, really being able to lean into that, and hearing from God and how he has wired you, and understanding that as he reveals things to you, that's when you start taking steps. When he reveals
that.
He tells you to lean into it,
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So, Megan, it is obvious that, like us, you are a woman of faith. How do you create space for that spiritual growth inside a business setting? Meaning that, like, sometimes it's tricky. I would love to hear some advice that you have for someone who's a faith-based leader that's maybe struggling with sharing their faith at work. Like, as the CEO, ultimately, I suppose it's your decision how or if people share at work. But I want to know if you have any advice, particularly for those that maybe the environment is not faith-based.
Oh, that's a good question.
So, I would say first and foremost, having a protected time in the Word every day before I step into the office is a must. I mean, I try to not even put stuff on my calendar here recently. I've not been very disciplined with it, but before 10 a.m. That doesn't mean I hadn't started working at 5. That just means that I try to not have any meetings that constrict that time, because I know I need that time to really, spend time in the Word and in personal growth. And then when I show up to the office, I'm so much more clear mind, clear focus, and I'm able to be more present. That's first and foremost. We open every meeting with prayer. It's in the agenda of our meeting, and whether it's a one-to-one or a group meeting, it's in every meeting. I think the best thing that you can do is just lead by example.
Authentically.
Authentically.
Yeah.
I started doing a couple of devotions with with my leadership team, and then when we would do an offsite, I'd prepare a devotion, and I never asked them to do the same. I mean, it's just what I did, and
Right.
thankfully, it was what I could do because it's our business, right?
Right.
But, over time, it's pretty beautiful to see that, even, my CFO, she led an offsite with the entire organization and the ERP, and she opened in a devotion and opened in prayer. And, it was so beautiful to see that, like, she got comfortable. I didn't ask her to do that. She just felt like I had something to say. I
Yeah.
had something that the team needed to hear. And so I was bold and did it. And, it just was beautiful to see when you model and you can give people the space and permission to do that.
Yes.
People will step in and
Yeah.
try it. Hey, I'll pray today.
Well, it's the culture you're building, right? Like it's just woven into the culture that you've built.
Yeah. And I think for those that are listening that maybe that's not the culture, like what I heard you say, Megan, is lead by example. Like even if it's not
Yes.
the culture there, that's okay. You could still be who you are. You could
Absolutely.
still show up how you show up and don't apologize for it, right? Like
Yes.
this is who I am. This is what I stand for. I'm not throwing it down your throat.
Nope.
Just kind of take it or leave it.
Absolutely.
So good. Obviously, a lot about your company is rooted in history, right? Your parents started this in 1985, and you and your husband, right now, they're so young. I'm sure that there has been talk about legacy within your organization because of how it was rooted and where you are. So I'm going to ask this question really in two parts. It's the same question, but I'm going to ask it in two parts. So the first part, I want you to think about the question and answer it like it was your mom and dad. Like I was asking this of your mom and dad. So if we ask your parents this question, what would they say? What is one thing that you hope your team always remembers about your leadership? So how would your parents answer? What's one thing you hope your team always remembers about
Gosh,
your
that kind of tears me up.
It's funny because we were able to have a founders dinner last week, and someone actually asked that question.
Oh, wow.
Is wild because I had no idea that that
Yeah.
this would be asked,
Wow.
and the question was answered differently. But my mom's answer was, they really know what they're talking about. And I think for me, I just kind of laughed when she said that because I was like, I guess, growing up in the business, that was a challenge. I mean, I think because I didn't have the experience that Chase did in the field,
Yeah.
I've been kind of catching up along the way. And, for her mama bear, I think was like, they really know what they're talking about. But, my dad also kind of piggybacked off of it and said, faith comes first. This business is God's business. This success is God's success, and these people are God's people. And he just led so beautifully with it's their faith.
Right.
It's their faith. It was our faith, and we hope that that's the legacy that is left here. So,
And obviously it is. I mean, looking at you and
for
seeing the
sure.
things. Okay, so how would you, now we're asking you, what's one thing you hope your team will always remember about your leadership, about Megan's leadership?
I would probably have to say just giving you permission to be the person that God's called you to be. That's the biggest thing that I want people to walk away with. what God's called me to be and what God's called y'all to be is completely different, right? And I think once we really lean into that and we give people that permission, it's beautiful what God does in people's hearts.
Wow, so good. So, Megan, we know that learning and growing is important to you. And so I'm curious, what's a leadership lesson you didn't learn in a course or a training and you only learned it through experience?
Their expectations. You know, how to create mutually agreed upon expectations in the workplace.
So how do you do it? Let us in on the secret.
Give us the secret.
Let us
Our
know.
listeners want to know.
You know, I think you have to have clear roles and responsibilities that are objective, that are tied to metrics. And I know that sounds simple, but I have been on this mission to get that for this organization for years. And am just now getting to a place where we have that. And the reason why I'm so passionate about that is because, you know, one of our core values is relationships. And my parents built this business on relationships, but I was their daughter and I didn't have any expectations. I didn't have any metrics. I didn't have a job description. I didn't have anything. And I knew that, okay, there's pros and cons to this, but my parents believed more in me than I could ever believe in myself, which is a great thing. But yet that meant that the goalpost was always moving, right? It was never a win because we could have always done this, or now you've done this, now let's do this, you know? And it just always, for me, I knew that their hearts and how I felt were not aligned. And so I have just been, you know, when you have relationships with people that you deeply care about their families and you deeply care about their success as a person personally, and you don't have those clear responsibilities, like what does excellence look like? It's not how good of friends I am with you. It's really, truly like, what does the job require and where are we at, you know? Because I want to do both. I want to know your family. I want to know your kids. I want to pray for you when things are hard. And, you know, we can always give each other grace, but yet we do have to run a business. And here's what it looks like, you know? So that's probably the one thing that if I were to ever be able to write a book, I would probably write about is just being the power of the objectivity. It gives you the freedom to go deeper in your relationships.
So good. Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. Megan, if our listeners want to stay connected with you, if there's anything else that you're up to that you want to share with them, like where will they find you? How can they find you?
Yes, so you can follow me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place.
Okay, and we'll put your LinkedIn in the show notes so they'll be able to connect with you that way. That'll be great.
Okay, as we wrap up today, we ask this to all of our guests, Megan. What is your favorite leadership quote?
Everyone deserves to be led well.
We love that one too.
We love that one too. We did a podcast episode on it because we love it so much. So that is such a good one. Thank you.
I don't know if anything tops that. I just, everyone deserves that, you know.
I know.
Absolutely.
It sums it up, doesn't it?
It does. All the others go beneath it, I think.
That's exactly right. And listeners, do you have a favorite leadership quote? Let us know that too, and we may spotlight it on a future episode.
We'll be back next week with another quote and more leadership insights. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to talk about it. Bye, bestie. Bye, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Of course. Thank you.
We want to thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, please show us some love by clicking the 3 dots to download the podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating on your podcast app and talk about it with other leaders to help them find the show from any of the major podcast apps. We'd love for you to follow us on social media too. Mpactful with an M _ messages on Instagram and Mpactful Messages on LinkedIn.